Hello. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we celebrate Kwanzaa with the Kwanzaa principles. And we're going to have a full 7-day Kwanzaa program. And welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Umoja and faith, strengthening families, finances, and community leadership. Unity is the foundation of strong families, healthy finances, and effective leadership. Tonight, we're going to explore Umoja through a faith-based lens, emphasizing collaboration, trust, and collective responsibility in relationships, money, and community impact. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm your host, Janelle Pulley, and we're very excited, and I appreciate Devon Joseph with the Massive Action Mentality for joining us this evening as well, and sharing with us the practice of Umoja, the blueprint for unity. As displayed here, you see the 3 circles of practice, and unity is a practice and not a feeling. So when we look at it, it's a discipline to counter fragmentation and repair our connections. There may be trauma in the families, but we want to bring that together because there's been systematic fragmentation for many, many years. With modern life being designed to fracture us, unity is a chosen, difficult response. And for the relational repair and the personal coherence, we want to make sure that we come together tonight to align our actions with our values. Be whole within ourselves first, perfect, whole, and complete. That's what we all are. Perfect, whole, and complete. How we are and how we show up for everyone in the world, how we show up for our family. Collective responsibility, showing up for our local community as kin, not as savior or observer. Oftentimes, here we are in this season, and we're looking for opportunities as a community to support our community, to volunteer, whether it be a shelter, whether it be a food bank. We're looking to serve, and not as a savior, not as an observer, but as, hey, you're my brother, you're my sister. I'll never forget growing up in a predominantly Caucasian community. It's like, oh, you're my sister from another mother. And that's the what we would call ourselves, because it's like, oh, we're sisters. We just have different moms. And in that regard, but the goal of the Umoja covenant is to commit to these practices with the witness promised of truth and accountability. That word unity, accountability, it's in the word there, right? And the Webster's dictionary describes unity as a state of being united or joined as a whole. And then there's also like the biblical version of unity as defined in the Bible. And the biblical meaning is very deep, as is defined, into scripture, and is grounded with the oneness of God and flows to believers, calling for harmonious integration of diverse individuals united by faith, purpose, and love. So it's all about love, as the famous Ian Van Zant would say. It's all about love. So faith, purpose, and love, and community. That's what we're talking about tonight. And there are important Bible verses about unity. I will share that includes Psalm 133 and 1, John 17:20 through 23, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 3 through 6, and Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 13, and Colossians chapter 3, verse 14, and highlighting unity's beauty, importance, and the foundation of love. And at its core, the Shema, the ancient declaration of faith found in Deuteronomy 6 and 4, proclaims, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." The foundational truth reverberates throughout Scripture, finding its fullest expression in the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, one God in 3 persons, united in perfect love and harmony. So I will now go to the official Kwanzaa website and share with you that during the week of Kwanzaa and all around you, you can support your efforts by making a donation through their site. And with the official Kwanzaa celebration, I'll give you a little history about celebration of family, community, and culture. And with Kwanzaa, it's an African American and Pan African holiday which celebrates family, community, and culture. It was created in 1966. It was created in 1966 by Dr. Maulana Karenga, a professor of Africana Studies. And Kwanzaa is a 7-day cultural festival beginning December 26th and ending January the 1st. It joins communitarian values and practices of continental African and African American culture. And during the holidays, the families and communities organize activities around the Ngozo Saba, the seven principles, Umoja, today is unity, day one, Kuja Chakalua, self-determination, Ujima, collective working responsibility, Ujama, cooperative economics, Nia, purpose, Kumba, creativity, and Imani, faith. Participants also celebrate with feasts, karamu, music, dance, poetry, narratives, and the end of the holiday with a day dedicated to reflection and recommitment to the seven principles and other central cultural values. And we're going to have a little bit of music. We're going to showcase some dance and poetry during this week of our Kwanzaa celebration here virtually on the social media channels that you are tuning into. So thank you so much for being here. We do appreciate you. And the annual Kwanzaa theme and founder's message is practicing the seven principles in dimly lit times, lifting up the light, hurrying the dawn. And since Dr. Maulana Karenga initiated the practice of providing an annual Kwanzaa theme and annual Kwanzaa founder message, he has sought to offer a theme and message which serve as a framework and focus for the work the African American community can relate to the principles and practices of Kwanzaa to enduring and current issues of life, work, and struggle. The annual Kwanzaa theme and founder's message also serve as another point of community for the national and Pan-African unity. Umoja, the first principle of the Ngozo Saba for its principle, Umoja, which makes all other principles and related practices possible, promising, and successful. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight in the three circles of practice. As we shared, is the personal coherence, the relational repair, collective responsibility that leads us to the goal of the Umoja covenant to commit to these practices with a witness promise of truth and accountability. So welcome to day one of our Kwanzaa celebration. Tonight, as we center on Umoja unity, unity in faith, unity in finances, and unity in leadership. As we reflect, consider where alignment is needed in your household, your money, and your calling. So we have some questions about for you to consider, and feel free to take out a journal or a piece of paper and ponder on these three questions. And I encourage you to journal one action that you'll take away this week to strengthen unity in your money or relationships. And look to find out where does unity show up for you or break down in your finances? Where does unity show up for you or break down in your finances? Oftentimes I'm looking at and coaching with couples, and we sometimes have a breakdown in our finances, but unity, coming together, being supportive of one another in a financial way, in a being present way, is very important. So where does unity show up or break down? Is it that you hide from money or hide from your circumstances around money and your finances? And how does faith guide financial decisions in your household? We're going to talk about faith and Imani later this week. And how does faith guide financial decisions in your household? And then what does unified leadership look like in your community? I know in the Black community, communities all over, leadership is different. It's a different look, and it takes on a different way in leadership. So it is very important to have unity. It is very important to have unity. So we thank you so much for joining us tonight. And this is our first night for celebration. And I am going to look at and share with you from the official website the roots and branches of Kwanzaa, and introduce the cultural synthesis. The holiday Kwanzaa is a product of creative cultural synthesis. And this is to say, it is the product of critical selection and judicious mixture on several levels. This means that it is rooted in both cultural values and the practice of Africans on the continent and in the United States, with strict attention to cultural authenticity, the values for a meaningful, principled, and productive life. Secondly, the continental African components of Kwanzaa are a synthesis of various cultural values and practice from different continental African peoples. In a word, the values and practices of Kwanzaa are selected from peoples from all parts of Africa, south and north, west and east, in a true spirit of Pan-Africanism. And finally, Kwanzaa is a synthesis in the sense that it is based in both conception and self-conscious commitment on tradition and reason. Kaweda, the philosophy out of which Kwanzaa is created, teaches us that all we think and do should be based on tradition and reason, which are in turn rooted in practice. Tradition is our grounding, our cultural anchor, and therefore our starting point. It is also a cultural authority for any claims to cultural authenticity for anything we do and think as an African people. And reason is necessary, critical thought about our tradition, which enables us to select, preserve, and build on the best of what we have achieved and produced. In the light of our knowledge and our needs born of experience, through reason rooted in experience or practice, then we keep our tradition as an African people from becoming stagnant, sterile, convention, or emptied historical reference. Instead, our tradition becomes and remains a living, and constantly expanded and enriched experience. So Kwanzaa, from the continental African roots, you have the first fruit celebration, which we'll do, the gathering of people, their reverence for the creator and creation, the commemoration of the past, the recommitment to cultural ideals, and the celebration of the good. So we will express all of that from the continental African roots this week. And the African American branch with the National and Pan-African meeting, I'll share that. The roots of Kwanzaa then are in ancient and ongoing continental African first fruits or first harvest celebrations. They give Kwanzaa its motto and shared values and practices, and its historical groundedness rooted in this ancient history and culture. Kwanzaa develops a flourishing branch of the African cultural tree. It emerges in the context of African American life and struggle as a recreated and expanded ancient tradition. Thus, it bears special characteristics and meaning for African people, for African American people, that is. But it is not only an African American holiday, but also a Pan African one, for it draws from the cultures of various African peoples and is celebrated by millions of Africans throughout the African community. Moreover, these various African peoples celebrate Kwanzaa because it speaks not only to African Americans in a special way, but also to Afrikaans as a whole in its stress on history, values, family, and culture. Kwanzaa was established in 1966 in the midst of the Black freedom movement and thus reflects its concern for cultural groundedness in thought and practice and the unity and self-determination associated with this. And it was conceivable and established. It was conceived and established to serve several functions. For reaffirming and restoring our culture, Kwanzaa was created to reaffirm and restore our rootedness in African culture. It is, therefore, an expression of recovery and reconstruction of African culture, which was being conducted in the general context of the Black liberation movement of the 1960s and in the specific context of the organization US. In the 60s, the Black movement after 1965 was defined by its thrust to return to the source, to go back to Black. It stressed the rescue and reconstruction of African history and culture, the redefinition of ourselves and our culture, and a restructuring of the goals and purpose of our struggle for liberation and a higher level of human life based on an Afrocentric model. This stress on restoration was evidenced in cultural practices such as renaming of oneself and one's children with African names, wearing the natural or Afro hairstyle, and African clothes, relearning African languages, especially Swahili, and reviving African life cycle ceremonies such as naming, nationalization, the rites of passage, akika and mahando, wedding, arusi, and funeral, maziko. This restorative thrust also involved the struggle for an establishment of Black studies in the academy and the building of community institutions which restored and reintroduced African culture, like cultural centers, theaters, art galleries, independent schools, etc. Moreover, there was an emphasis on returning to the African continent physically, culturally, and spiritually for cultural revitalization to reestablish links and build ongoing mutual beneficial and reinforcing relationships. And finally, there was an attempt to recover and begin to live and even relive African values in the family and community as a way to rebuild and reinforce family, community, and culture. So this is very important. Unity is very important for reinforcing the bonds between us. And secondly, Kwanzaa was created to serve as a regular communal celebration to reaffirm and reinforce the bond between us as a people. It was designed to be an ingathering to strengthen community and reaffirm common identity, purpose, and direction. Kwanzaa was created to reaffirm and reinforce the bonds between us as a people in both the national and Pan-African sense. So the practice of unity is very important principle for Kwanzaa. To strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. Umoja is the first and foundational principle of Nguzo Saba, for without it, all other principles suffer. Unity is both a principle and a practice of togetherness in all things good and of mutual benefit. It is principled and harmonious togetherness, not simply a being together. And this is why value rootedness is so important, even dispensable. Unity as principled and harmonious togetherness is a cardinal virtue of both classical and general African societies. In ancient Egypt, harmony was a cardinal virtue of Ma. For example, righteousness, rightness. In fact, one of the ways to translate Ma'at is to define it as harmony. Harmony on the natural, cosmic, and social level. Likewise, sing among the Dinka means both morality and harmonious living together. Thus, in ancient Egyptian and Dinka society, one cannot live a moral life without living in harmony with other members of the community. If unity is in essence a principle, it is no less a practice as all are of the other principles. For practice is central to African ethics, and all claims to ethical living and commitment to moral principles are tested and proved or disproved in relations with others. Relations, then, are the hinge on which morality turns and the ground on which it rises or falls. In this regard, we can refer back to the discussion on character development through ethical instruction. Character development is not simply to create a good person abstracted from the community, but rather a person in positive interaction, a person whose quality of relations with others is defined first of all by a principled and harmonious togetherness. For example, a real and practiced unity. Another way of discussing unity is to see it as active solidarity. This essentially means a firm, dependable togetherness that is born, based, and sustained in action. It is usually applied to groups, organizations, classes, peoples, and expresses itself as building and acting together in a mutual benefit. The key here again is practice. In the end, practice proves everything. And no matter how many books one reads on swimming, sooner or later he or she must get into the water and swim. This may be called on this level the priority of practice. And finally, unity means a oneness, a similarity, and sameness that gives us an identity as a people, an African people. And inherent in this identity as a people is the ethical and political imperative to self-consciously unite in order to define, defend, and develop our interests. And now I'm going to move on to family unity, intergenerational unity, community unity, and lastly, the Pan-African unity. And unity, for family unity, is a principle and practice that begins in the family, but presupposes a value orientation of each member. Adults and children must respect and approach unity as a moral principle of family and community, not simply a political slogan. As a principle and practice, this means principled and harmonious living with brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sharing and acting in unison. It means avoidance of conflict and quick, willing, and principled resolution when it occurs. It means a yielding and gentleness of exchange as taught in the sacred Husay, chapter 35. The family must reject harshness and practice gentleness, stress cooperation and avoid conflict, and be very attentive to things that would divide or create differences negative to togetherness. This is especially important is the unity of the father and the mother, for they are the models for the children and the foundation for the family in every sense of the word. Here, the African concept of complementary of male and female as distinct from and opposed to the concept of conflict of the genders is instructive and of value. As Anna J. Cooper, an educated and social theorist, taught, there is a feminine as well as masculine side to truth. And these are related not as inferior or superior, not as better or worse, not as weaker or stronger, but as complements. Complements in one necessary and symmetric whole. The recognition of this truth and responding creatively to it is necessary, she says, to give balance to the person and to save the nation from its extremes. It is also a shield against sexism. For example, the social practice of using gender to establish and or justify exploitation, oppression, or unequal relations. And by definition, in an African complementary, three principles centered internal to it are necessary in reinforcing of both the concept and practice: equality, reciprocity, and friendship. One starts from the assumption of human equality and cultivates social equality as its logical and necessary complement. Reciprocity among equals is morally and socially compelling. And friendship is the fruit and expected outcome of a mutually respectful and mutually beneficial relationship, which is tested and tempered through time and is rooted in mutual investment in each other's happiness, well-being, and development. And now, moving on to intergenerational unity. Finally, the family must, as in African culture, the focal point of unity, not simply of siblings and of genders, but also of generations. One of the most important expressions of family unity is the respect and collective concern and care for the elders. Respect for elders, as Imani points out, is a cardinal article of the code of behavior of the African society. One who does not respect his or her elders is seen as immoral and uncultured. Elders are respected like the ancestors they will become for their long life service to the community, for their achievement, for providing an ethical model, and for the richness of their experience and the wisdom this has produced. Thus, elders are seen as judges and reconcilers. It is they who hear cases of conflict and problems and offer solutions. One of the most important aspects of African respect for elders is that it makes them useful and active in the community, unlike the worst of European society, which deprives them of meaningful roles and places them to the side, leaving them with only failing memories. Also, the active participation and involvement of elders in the daily life of the family not only benefits them, but the younger people. For it teaches them to understand and appreciate the process of growing old and gives them access to a seasoned knowledge and experience and helps prevent the so-called generation gap so evident and advertised in European society. The key to this linking of young and old is the concept of lineage, which links all of the living, the departed, and yet the unborn. This is translated in practice into the extended family in the protocol, ritual, reciprocity, and remembrance this involves and requires. Early in life, continental African children are taught to memorize and recite their family tree as far back as any ancestor is known. And this keeps historical memory alive and reaffirms respect for those living and departed who contributed to their coming into being and cultural molding. That is truly amazing and beneficial for intergenerational unity to be available to us. I look upon generations and I see my mother, I see her children, her children's children, and then even her children's children's children. She has great grandchildren, and the intergenerational unity is amazing. I have a great aunt who's going to be 100 years old next year, and it's amazing to see her interact with her children, her children's children, and her children's children's children, her great grandchildren. It is amazing, truly a blessing for intergenerational unity, for all of the families to come together in one unit. And now I'll move on to the community unity. If one starts with the family when discussing unity, the community, local and national, becomes the next level of concern and the practice of unity. The family, as it is written, is the smallest example of how the nation or a national community works. For the relations, values, and practice one has in the family are a reflection and evidence of what one will find in the community. Unity begins in the family, but it extends to organizational affiliation and then in the unity of organizations, such as African American United Fronts. Malcolm X taught that community unity first depended on everyone's belonging to an organization, then all organizations uniting on the basis of common interests and aspirations. He posed community unity in its two-level form as morally compelling. It was for him irresponsible and self-destructive not to unite around common interests and instead glory in differences. That's why the meeting between him and Martin Luther King Jr. was so important. That was unity in action. And what African Americans needed to do, he taught, is to forget their superficial organizational differences and even differences of religion and unite around their common identity as Africans and their common interests, especially the interests of liberation. And I will close out with discussing the Pan-African family unity. The ultimate level of unity for African people is Pan-African unity, or the unity of the world African community. This is also called unity of the race. Thus, when Marcus Garvey says, up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. He is talking to the world, the African community. The form of unity this takes is Pan-Africanism, the struggle to unite all Africans everywhere around common interests and make African cultural and political presence on the world stage both powerful and permanent. Pan-Africanism requires and urges that we see ourselves and act in history as an African people belonging to a world community of African peoples. In this way, we self-consciously share in both the glory and burden of our history. And in that knowledge and context, act to honor, preserve, and expand that history in the struggle for liberation and even higher levels of human life. That is so amazing, the Pan-African family unity. So unity, Umoja, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. The essential foundation of the seven principles: family unity, intergenerational unity, community unity, and Pan-African unity. So now we'll take you to the lighting of the Kinara for day one. And it is very important when we look at the light for the Kinara for Kwanzaa. So we will light the first candle. In preparation of the candle lighting, there is a traditionally established way of celebrating Kwanzaa, and we should therefore observe these guidelines to make our Kwanzaa the most beautiful and engaging one and to keep the tradition. Without definite guidelines and core values and practices, there is no holiday. First, you should come to the celebration with a profound respect for its values, symbols, and practices, and do nothing to violate its integrity, beauty, and expansive meaning. Secondly, you should not mix the Kwanzaa holiday or its symbols, values, and practice with any other culture. This would violate the principles of the Kuja Chogalia, self determination, and thus violate the integrity of the holiday. And thirdly, choose the best and most beautiful items to celebrate Kwanzaa. This means taking time to plan and select the most beautiful objects of art, colorful African cloth, fresh fruits and vegetables, so that every object used to represent African culture and your commitment to the holiday in the best of the ways. And with the candle lighting, the first, a central place in the home for Kwanzaa set, the symbols of the Kwanzaa is chosen. A table is then spread with the beautiful piece of African cloth. Then the mat is placed down, and all of the other symbols are placed on it or immediately next to it to symbolize our rootedness in our tradition. Next, the kanara, the candle holder, is placed on the mat, and the Mishuma Saba, 7 candles are placed in the kanara. The colors are black, red, and green. Black for the people, red for their struggle, and green for the future and hope that comes from their struggle. Therefore, there is 1 black candle for the people, 3 red, and 3 green candles. These are the Mishuma Saba, the 7 candles, and they represent the 7 principles. The black candle represents the first principle, Umoja, unity. That's what we've been discussing tonight. And it is placed in the center of the kanara. The red candles represent the principles of Kujika Julia, self-determination, Ujama, cooperative economics, and Kumba, creativity, and are placed to the left of the black candle are the green candles, representing the principles of Ujima, collective work and responsibility, Nia, purpose, and Imani, faith, and are placed to the right of the black candle. The black candle is lit the first day of the celebration, and that's tonight. And the remaining candles are lit afterwards from left to right on the following days. And this procedure is to indicate that the people come first, then the struggle, and then the hope that comes from the struggle. So today, we light Umoja on day 1. The candle for today is Umoja. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us this evening as we greet you during Kwanzaa on the day. As we share, the greetings are to reinforce the awareness of and commitment to the 7 principles. It is Habaragani, and the answer is in each of the principles for each of the days of Kwanzaa. Habaragani, what's the news? And we'll give gifts, and the colors and decorations are black, red, and green, as noted, as I shared with you above, and can be utilized in decorations for Kwanzaa. And the traditions and decorations should also include your African items, the African baskets, the cloth patterns, art objects, and harvest symbols. So as we remain, gifts are given mainly to the children, but always include a book and a heritage symbol. The book is to emphasize the African value and tradition of learning stress since ancient Egypt. And the heritage symbol is to reaffirm and reinforce the African community to tradition and history. Thank you so much for joining us tonight with our day one of our Kwanzaa celebration. And we do appreciate you. And please continue to go to celebrate Kwanzaa. Learn about the symbols, learn about the greetings, learn about the celebration, the meditation, and what it means for the children. Additionally, you may go to the official Kwanzaa website.org to learn more. I thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we look forward to celebrating our second day of Kwanzaa, the Kuji Chagalia, which is self-determination, to define ourselves, name ourselves, and create for ourselves and speak for ourselves. So we'll discuss self-determination tomorrow night on December 27th. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and may you be blessed and have unity in the community with your family, faith, and finances. God bless everyone.